There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "Some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?"
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And now your host, Stephen Hanks.
Good morning to all of you out there in Sedona and throughout the Verde Valley listening right now on this August 3rd, 2024 through KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM Mellow Mountain Radio. My name is Stephen Hanks, and this radio show, which will be heard every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., is called The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And I also want to welcome folks from all over Arizona and around the country who may be tuning into the live stream on mellowmountainradio.com, and anyone who is listening to the podcast version on Apple or Amazon Podcast, YouTube, or Spotify. So, folks, it's been another week in politics, both locally here in Arizona and nationally, that actually feels like a month. On the national scene, there is so much to talk about, one hardly knows where to begin, and when you've only got an hour show, I'm just going to get into some of the monumental events of the past few days. From the freeing of those Americans held prisoner by Russia, to how we experienced another week of Donald Trump's sociopathic hell, to assessing who Kamala Harris might choose as a VP running mate in a couple of days. But since we had a big primary election date in Arizona this past Tuesday, I'd like to review how the results turned out in the Sedona area and statewide, and I won't just be talking about what happened on the Democratic side. And by the way, after I talk about these races, I'm going to bring in a very special guest who's waiting with bated breath to come onto the show. So, in the races for the Arizona Senate nominations, Ruben Gallego, who will be the next senator from this state, ran unopposed on the Democratic side. But amazingly, on the Republican side, 385,000 Arizonans thought it was a good idea to give 24/7, 365 days a year, 2020 and 2022 election denier and complete loon Kari Lake the Senate nomination. The good news for Ruben Gallego and Democrats is that Kari Lake will be the opponent in November, and hopefully after Lake loses that race, we will finally never hear anything from her again. My goodness, what an embarrassment. Speaking of total loons and embarrassments, 2022 Arizona Senate election loser Blake Masters lost the Republican primary for Arizona Congressional District 8 to Abe Hamadeh, who actually is no prize either, as he only challenged his loss in the 2022 race for Attorney General 3 times. By the way, Hamadeh was yet another example of Donald Trump's transactional pathology, as he first endorsed Hamadeh but realized that would piss off a big donor in oligarch Peter Thiel, who has been Blake Masters' mentor, so Trump hedged his bets and close to Election Day decided to endorse Masters as well. You got all that, folks? Closer to Sedona and the Verde Valley, in the Congressional District 2 races, Native American Jonathan Nez ran unopposed on the Democratic side, while Trump sycophant and election denier Eli Crane beat Jack Smith for the Republican nomination by around 65,000 votes. Democrats need to do everything they can to help Jonathan Nez bounce out of Congress, who, among other nutty policies, supports banning abortion even when the woman is a victim of rape or incest, and even supports allowing states to punish women and doctors. Believe me, I'm going to have a lot more to say about this totally toxic congressman in future Patriotic Progressive shows, and I will be having Jonathan Nez as a future guest, maybe a couple of times. By the way, the election turnout in general in Arizona was disappointing, but I guess you can chalk that up to primaries and the summer and a lot of candidates running unopposed. And by the way, you can't really make any judgments about vote totals when candidates are running unopposed. It's just, you just can't really make any allusion to what is going to happen down the road in the general election. So I wanted to say a little bit about the state Senate primary election in Legislative District 1, which covers Yavapai County and part of Coconino County. So another election-denying loon and conspiracy theorist from the Carrie Lake Blake Masters mold, Mark Fincham, who lost the 2022 race for Attorney General to Adrian Fontes, thank goodness, unfortunately beat incumbent Ken Bennett for the Republican nomination by about 9,000 votes. In November, Fincham will face Democrat Mike Vogel, who ran unopposed. In the races for the Legislative District 1 state legislature seats, incumbent Arizona state reps Quang Nugent and Selena Bliss fended off Shondell Waldman to win the Republican nominations, and they will face Democrats Marcia Smith and Jay Ruby in November. For the three open seats on the Arizona Corporation Commission, the three Democrats, Joshua Polachek, Elenia Aguiar, and Jonathan Hill, all of whom were on this show last Saturday, will face three Republicans, Rachel Walden, Renee Lopez, and Leah Marquez Peterson, the latter being the only incumbent running for re-election. So here are the big races in Sedona. In order to avoid a runoff during the general election in November, candidates needed to win at least 50% of the vote plus one vote of the total number of votes cast. So in the race for mayor, incumbent Mayor Scott Jablow earned 58% of the vote and defeated challenger John Martinez by a little over 250 votes out of about 2,000 votes cast. So Jablow will be the mayor until another election in 2026. For the Sedona City Council, which are 4-year terms, there were 3 open seats and 4 candidates running. Incumbents Holly Plug and Kathy Kinsella and first-time candidate Derek Pfaff came out ahead of Catherine Todd, who was basically running as the Republican in the race. Last but not least, the race that turned out to be the surprise upset of the election was Nikki Check beating incumbent Donna Michaels for the Democratic nomination as District 3 County Supervisor. And shockingly, it wasn't even close, as Check won by about 2,300 votes, give or take a few, and she'll be running in November against Republican Lori Drake. Needless to say, the Patriotic Progressive will be pulling for Ms. Check, and I now have the pleasure of having her on the phone right now. Nikki, congratulations on your big victory.
Thank you, Stephen. It's nice to be here with you.
I should tell people who may not hear my other show, Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, that on July 6th, Saturday, July 6th, which was your birthday, I have that date right, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were here on July 6th on your birthday on my Sedona Life show for the entire show when we were talking about the race. And you have the honor of being the first guest that I've had on both shows. So there you go.
All right. Nice.
All right. So,
well, yeah.
So, all right. So what I was going to ask you is, was there any way that you thought that you were going to, I mean, I'm sure you wanted to win and you're always going to be confident you're going to win, but did you think it was going to be this kind of blowout?
I had no idea. Of course, your mental state when you're running for office is that you don't quite have enough votes. You need to do more. You need to fundraise more. You need to, there's never a feeling of comfort when you're running, and there shouldn't be. You can't take anything for granted. But no, I was really shocked. I was preparing for a nail biter till midnight, and to have it be over at 8:30 with the first results coming in.
Oh,
I was very surprised.
Yeah, I saw all your pictures of your supporters and you partying when the election results came in on social media, and it looked like you guys were having a great time. What do you account for the vote total? Why do you think it happened that you beat Donna Michaels by such a large margin? Anything you can put your finger on?
Well, I'm really impressed with voters, I have to say, because, it was a nuanced race. On the issues, Donna and I weren't strikingly different from one another. Mm-hmm. And so I have to give credit to the voters for really investigating both of us as candidates and figuring out, who they wanted to trust in the next election. So I feel really honored to have that trust. I do think that even though generally the primaries have lower turnout, mm-hmm. this primary had much higher turnout in Yavapai County. Mm-hmm. And so, normally you see 35 to 40% turnout for Yavapai County and for this district, and Yavapai County saw 45% turnout.
Yeah, I did notice that. That was good.
One thing I was worried about was that my age group wouldn't turn out. And so I'm hoping, that some of that 45% extra was from my age group, because in general, people under 50 don't turn out in the primary. And so I'm very, very pleasantly surprised and ready to, work hard in the next 3 months to do the same thing on November 5th.
Yeah, one thing, and I know you probably might not want to comment on this part of it, but, observing Donna Michaels' campaign and how many ads she placed in the local press and radio advertising and signs all over town, which you did too, although hers were a lot bigger and looked like they were more expensive. It seems like, for the number of votes she got, which was only about, I think, 1,200, the amount of money she spent per vote was pretty high. I don't know what to say to that other than, were you able to have a little money left over in your campaign coffers for the general?
No, I spent almost everything.
Okay.
So I think the newspapers reported on the last quarter, but I've raised about $45,000 and I spent about $44,000. So I can pay my phone bill and stuff, but I'll be fundraising straight away. But I think one of the things that's true about elections is that money does not always directly translate to votes. And I experienced that in 2016 when I ran for the state Senate. I think I had fundraised maybe 2 or 3 times my Republican incumbent opponent, and I got very close. But yeah, you can't buy an election, and so I was not worried about being the highest fundraiser. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. I think there's another thing that when you look at the votes, people might be concerned about, because Lori Drake, the Republican challenger, overall got 115 more votes than both Donna and I combined. Mm-hmm. And that's what I also just wanted to touch upon, because there's something called an overvote or an undervote. Mm-hmm. And an undervote is when somebody doesn't fill in the circle. They leave that option blank. An overvote is when somebody fills in actually more than you're allowed to vote for.
Right.
So funny enough, there were 42 people who voted for both Donna and I.
Oh, jeez.
But here's the thing, it's all about
people weren't using their reading glasses, obviously, at that when they were filling out the ballot.
Well, and I'll tell you that, Democrats are not used to having contested races in the primary. So they are not generally trained to vote in the primary. Republicans are very well trained to vote in the primary. And independents generally choose a Republican ballot in Yavapai County because there's many more races that are competitive. And so I think the general election is going to be very different. But the heartening thing about looking at Lori Drake's numbers is that there were did I mention, so she had 115 more votes than Donna and I combined in the primary, but there were 1,537 people who chose not to fill in that circle. That basically said, we're going to see who she's running against before we make a decision there. So I think there's still a lot on the table. I think there are many voters whose minds aren't made up, and there's plenty of time to get in front of them.
Was Lori Drake running unopposed on that line?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think that the numbers would have been any different on the Republican side had she had a challenger?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So as long as you brought up Lori Drake, so now that we're officially in the general election part of the campaign, tell our listeners a little bit about her policies, I'm sure you're going to be thinking this through a lot more in the coming weeks with your campaign team, but what do you find is the basic differences between the two of you at this point?
I don't know Lori very well. She's a nice person. However, I have not been impressed with her knowledge of the issues, especially with water. That was one meaningful conversation that she took part in, the Citizens Water Advisory Group Water Forum on June 28th, which was an extensive forum, covered, in-depth water policy issues. And I was concerned that she was not willing to support a coordinating staff member for the county to bring back the Water Advisory Committee. So she wouldn't support the funding of a position that would help our entire county, be a little bit more focused about our water future. So that was concerning to me. And, I haven't really had my mind in, running against Lori. It's been very focused on Donna. So I'll have to, it'll take some regrouping and an investigation. I really hope that we get some opportunities to be in the same room together, to have the same questions asked of us. So I'm really looking forward to those opportunities.
Yeah. Do you think everything? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and that's still a question. For places like the Village of Oak Creek, there's no necessarily group that's already offered to host a forum, and so each community can consider inviting us. I'm willing to show up at any invitation to present to communities. So
sure.
That's my ask right now, I suppose.
Yeah, well, do you think things are going to be a little quiet up until Labor Day, and then after Labor Day, the campaign will really ramp up for the final 2 months?
Yeah, I think that's true. I will be really busy in the next month, but people do start paying attention to the election about 2 months out. So,
So what did you do at your victory party?
Well, I think we talked about this before. Even though I had a full career in the wine industry, I don't drink very much. And so at the very end of the night, someone had already, paid for a drink for me. And I thought, okay, what do I want my one small drink to be? And there was a victory ale. So we cheers with a little bit of victory ale.
I got to tell you, you're gonna appreciate this, and maybe because you spoke to him. So Wednesday night, my wife, the woman warrior, and I went to the Wild Wednesday outdoor film showing of Jersey Boys, the movie of the Four Seasons. And Al, I invited Al Camello, I guess he was your communications director?
My media
director. So I invited him to join us, and we were sitting together during the movie, and we had about a half an hour before the movie started. They wait till, the sun goes down to get the movie started. And all Al was doing almost the entire half hour was raving about you and showing me pictures about it. Was like he was talking about his daughter. It's like, Al, did you adopt her during this campaign? Like, what's going on?
I feel like I have been adopted by a large number of people, and I have nothing but gratitude for those that have adopted me.
So I'm curious about how your son handled all this, the campaign and the victory, and what's his take on everything?
He's been really flexible with me and patient, and I've done my best to balance this experience for him. Usually if I said no to going to an event or, going out to be amongst the people, it was to preserve a little time at home with him. So
right.
He got that speckled throughout the race. I think he's going to want to just sit at home with me and watch movies and chill out for the next couple of weeks. But he's so sweet. Okay, I have to tell you, he's got, his pot of money that he's been doing chores and gets for his birthdays and stuff. And he said, Mom, I want to make a donation to your campaign. How much do you think I should give you?
Yeah, Mom, don't give me allowance for the next 3 months. You could just keep it and put it into flyers. That is great.
So he wants me to win, and he's very proud of me, and he is willing to sacrifice a little bit of his, entertainment time for campaigning purposes. So I'm really lucky. He's a great kid.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You sound like a great mom, by the way. So I assume that you're really looking forward to starting the fundraising effort all over again, aren't you?
I actually am. I really enjoy fundraising. I mean, here's the thing. People like their money. If people have a choice, they generally like to hold on to their money, except for in instances where there's something important. And I think that, the dollars that you, get out of fundraising really are translate into something that people think is important. And I do think that this race is important, and I'm really excited to start to get my message out and let people know we have an opportunity at the county level to really get, some forward thinking happening. And one thing I mentioned probably before, but one thing I'm really excited about is the county's starting to look at revising the zoning ordinance, which is the enforcement document for land use planning. And, the composition of the supervisors is changing, and I really think we have a wonderful opportunity to get a more forward-thinking document that's going to serve Yavapai County for decades to come. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Did you find, in terms of fundraising, did you find it a little more difficult? Maybe you didn't really know this because you're so focused on your own race, but did you find people saying, well, I'd love to donate, but I'm spending money on the Ruben Gallego race, or I'm spending money on the presidential race, or the local Sedona races. I mean, you were in competition for dollars during a presidential election season. Did you find that to be an issue, or did you raise what you thought you could raise?
That's a good question. I think, like I said, different races are important to different people at different levels. And so, no, I didn't hear that a lot. I think people understood, especially because of the redistricting issues that were, part of the reason why Democrats voted against Donna Michaels. I think they did see the broader importance, of this position. But I think that there certainly is a lot of competition now between the general. The general's where a lot of money is spent, and I know I'll be in competition, and that's okay. And I really think that no matter how much money I bring in, we're going to work hard. We're going to knock doors. We're going to, do the grassroots work that needs doing, and the money that's associated with that will will be what it is. So.
Right. Are you going to start having these little micro group Zoom meetings like Kamala Harris has been doing, and have, like, cat ladies of Sedona for Nikki Check? Something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's just the first thing that came to mind. I mean, you could also do white dudes for Nikki Check. I mean, that could be fun.
Good old boys for Nikki Check.
Yeah, I would be on that call.
Yes, I really like doing more intimate gatherings so that people really have an opportunity to ask questions of me, get to know me, hear my story. And, it's not just a blanket ask for money, but, an opportunity to both get to know me and have me get to know what's important to them. It's a really informative time period, actually, because I learn a lot about what's important to people, which will serve me once I'm in office.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to have a fresh voice on the scene, and somebody who's so energetic and people seem to really like and feel comfortable with. So all I can say at this point is, hearty congratulations on the victory, and wish you the best of luck for the general election campaign. Thanks
for having me on, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, That was Nikki Check, who won the Democratic nomination as the District 3 County Supervisor in Tuesday's Arizona primary elections. So, thank you to Nikki. We are going to take a little break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the crazy last week in national politics and what's to come between now and our next show next Saturday. So, we'll be right back.
You're tuned in to Mellow Mountain Radio.
Scarlett Johansson. My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals help fuel my love for acting. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hello, Sedona. Stephen Hanks here. On my next episode of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, my in-studio guest will be Nate Myers, Executive Director of the Sedona Heritage Museum in Uptown Sedona. We'll discuss the city's storied history and learn about the museum's upcoming programs. So tune in on Saturday, August 3rd at 10 a.m. for Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio.
As veterans, we're no strangers to helping others.
That's what we were taught, service before self.
But we do have one question for the veterans listening.
When was the last time you reached out for help?
If you or someone you know needs resources, whether it's for stress, finances, employment, or mental health, don't wait. Reach out.
Find more information at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach.
Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
We are back with the Patriotic Progressive. Hey, how are you doing, everybody? So, it was a crazy week again in politics, and I have to tell you about something that I participated in on Monday night, which was, and I'm sure many people in my listening audience heard about this, it was the white dudes in support of Kamala Harris's run for the White House on Zoom. Actually, it was a YouTube Zoom. And that just an incredible turnout for this event, which came after black women for Kamala and white women for Kamala and gays for Kamala. There's going to be all kinds. There's going to be a deadheads for Kamala coming up. Going to be interesting to see the state of mind of those guys and those people who are on that deadheads for Kamala. But anyway, I digress. The white dudes for Kamala Zoom raised more than $4 million from about 190,000 participants. And guests on that call on Monday evening not only included contenders for Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, but also a slew of actors, including Jeff Bridges, obviously famous for portraying the dude in The Big Lebowski, and he very much sounded like the dude during that call. And Mark Hamill, who this was really great. Mark Hamill was able to secure a $50,000 donation during the call by delivering for somebody who said he was an idol his renowned Star Wars line, "I'm Luke Skywalker, and I'm here to rescue you." Now, the man who put up that donation, thanks to that comment from his hero, was Scott Galloway, a professor at New York University Stern School of Business, where he teaches brand strategy and digital marketing to second-year MBA students. He also is an occasional guest on Real Time with Bill Maher, and I've seen him there. I thought out of all of the comments on that Zoom call, many of which were great, Galloway's comments were the most interesting because he focused on what the Democrats need to do on messaging around the economy to counteract the right-wing narrative that Joe Biden's administration has been weak economically. So I'm going to read you a little edited version of what Professor Galloway told the white dudes for Harris, and I hope Kamala Harris's campaign was listening to this because it's really a great way to articulate the economic policy and what the Biden and Harris administration has done economically the last 4 years and how to campaign on it. So here we go. So Galloway said, here's the data on the economy. Since 2020, real GDP growth across the G7 nations has averaged 3.5%. Germany and the UK have averaged less than 2%. Real GDP growth since 2020 in the United States has been 8.5%. It has been double what the average GDP growth has been across the G7. So we say, well, the economy's running hot. That must mean there's terrible inflation. Well, our inflation is the lowest across the G7 nations. So the U.S. combined has the strongest growth with the lowest inflation. What is the result of that? 15,400,000 new jobs created in the last 3.5 years. And listen to this statistic, folks. That's more jobs that have been created in any 8-year tenure of any presidency. There are 195 nations, and 194 of them all wish they were the United States. The Biden-Harris administration has put on a masterclass in how to pull off the strongest economy in the world. The best, and here's a really good point that Professor Galloway made. The best investment in modern history has been the investment the Biden-Harris administration has made in Ukraine. For $60 billion a year, which is approximately 10% of our military budget, we have taken out a third of Russia's kinetic power. We have defanged the ridiculous notion that Russia's army was ferocious, and we have given President Xi of China real pause not to invade Taiwan. And most of that money to Ukraine has come back in spades to red states where there are manufacturing and weapon suppliers. This, Professor Galloway said, is the greatest investment in the history of the modern economy. Then Galloway switched to talk about the Biden administration in Israel. Quote, as a proud Jew, I was rattled by the events of October 7th. Quite frankly, I was very disappointed in some of the rhetoric coming out of the far left of my own party. And by the way, I tend to agree with that. I haven't become a one-issue voter, but I'm very concerned about Israel. And here's the bottom line on Biden-Harris as it relates to Israel. No one has been a more steadfast ally of Israel than the Biden-Harris administration. Within days of the October 7th attack, Hamas was hoping to inspire a multi-front war. The Biden-Harris administration immediately deployed 2 carrier strike forces and told Iran and its proxies to sit the hell down. Nobody has been stronger on Israel than Biden and Harris. And all this tough macho talk about the notion that we should finish the job, well, guess what? In addition to winning this war, which we will, we need an enduring, lasting peace. And who do you trust to figure out the nuance and the diplomacy of a lasting peace in the Mideast? Donald Trump? Are you serious? Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, and President Harris. This is how Zionists get an enduring peace in the Middle East. And finally, Professor Galloway said this: I'm raising two men. Whether we want it or not, the president is the premier role model for young men and women around the world. I am entirely certain that a President Harris would never mock the disabled. I'm even more certain that a President Harris would not have sex with a porn star and then try and cover it up illegally with campaign funds. And I'm entirely sure that President Harris will have one marriage and be a wonderful mother for all those like me, Professor Galloway talking about himself, whose stepmother played a wonderful role in their lives. And then came the payoff. I invite all of you like me who have spent the majority of their life talking the talk but not walking the walk to decide if this is a principle, not just an opinion. And the difference between the two is sacrifice. So I want to do that right now. There's different ways to contribute your time or your treasure or your talent. And then Professor Galloway put up $50,000 of his money if Mark Hamill would say, I'm Luke Skywalker and I'm here to rescue you. And of course, once he got his mic working, Mark Hamill said, I'm Luke Skywalker and I'm here to rescue you. And the Harris campaign had another $50,000 in the coffers. So I thought that was a pretty amazing statement. I thought it crystallized the situation on a couple of different levels, the economy, the Israel-Hamas war, and the differences between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, which are infinite. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about a number of things that's going on in the political scene. So let's talk a little bit about J.D. Vance because it's so much fun. I think we can all agree that J.D. Vance may be the worst vice presidential candidate pick in modern U.S. history, which shouldn't be surprising because a political incompetent like Donald Trump was doing the picking. Now, I'm sure there are people out there who are going to say, well, wasn't Sarah Palin terrible too? I think she was. I'm going to tell you something. Sarah Palin was terrible, and she probably cost John McCain the election against Barack Obama, but at least Sarah Palin had some charisma and was entertaining, if you're into that kind of entertainment. J.D. Vance is a complete washout and loser and dullard. Here's a newly uncovered comment J.D. Vance made to a group of influential young conservatives in a closed-door speech in 2021 when he said they should stand up for, quote, non-conventional people. And he was talking about people who speak truth, and wait for it, such as InfoWars founder Alex Jones, the guy who was convicted of or forced to give about $1 billion to the families of the children that were killed at Sandy Hook because he claimed that Sandy Hook was a false flag operation. This is what J.D. Vance said about Alex Jones. If you listen to Rachel Maddow every night, Rachel Maddow of MSNBC, who we know and love, the basic worldview that you have is that MAGA grandmas who have family dinners on Sunday and bake apple pies for their family are about to start a violent insurrection against this country. This is what Vance said. But if you listen to Alex Jones every day, you would believe that they hate our society. And, oh, by the way, a lot of them are probably sex perverts too. Vance then added, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's actually a hell of a lot more true than Rachel Maddow's view of society, unquote. Folks, Comparing Alex Jones to Rachel Maddow on any level, forget about anything else that he said, and he said a lot of crazy things like the cat lady's comment and his views on abortion and contraception. That should be disqualifying. I mean, what person in his right mind says something like that? It's just not even Donald. I don't even think Donald Trump would compare Alex Jones to Rachel Maddow. So that was beyond bizarre. Speaking of totally deranged comments, Donald Trump outdid even himself this past week at that Black Journalist Conference in Chicago. Entering the pantheon of Donald Trump's greatest hits was this beauty, quote, "I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs." And I wasn't intending to sound like Carl Sagan doing his billions and billions of stars. But I'm actually surprised Donald Trump doesn't say billions and billions of people are crossing the border. So then the black journalists on the panel asked Trump to define a black job. And he said, quote, "A black job is anybody that has a job." That should keep American comedians and late night hosts like Stephen Colbert busy for weeks. I'm just sorry Saturday Night Live isn't doing live shows right now. They're off for the summer. They would have had a field day with that. By the way, speaking of Saturday Night Live, it's great to hear that Maya Rudolph is going to come back once Saturday Night Live comes back in the fall and do her Kamala Harris impression, which is phenomenal. Anyway, I'm sure we all can agree that the release of the American prisoners out of Russia this past week was an amazing achievement by the Biden-Harris administration. Once we found out that Joe Biden actually was negotiating this deal an hour before he made his announcement that he was going to drop out of the race, is just it's hard to put into words how amazing that is and what could have been going through that man's mind when all that was going on. I mean, talking about, I don't know, nose to the grindstone, knowing what your responsibility is to the country and to the people that are American prisoners overseas, and thinking about that more than your own political career. Just amazing. And if any of you watched live those former prisoners in Russia coming off the plane at Joint Base Andrews that night, it was a really emotional moment. So now I want to get into, as a sports person who always likes doing predictions and figuring out who's going to win contests, I would be remiss if I didn't chime in on trying to figure out who Kamala Harris is going to pick as her vice presidential running mate, which is supposed to happen on Tuesday. And they're going to break it out in Philly on Tuesday. Now, there's a lot of speculation. By the way, first of all, the names that are in the mix, the 6 names that are in the mix, and let's see if I can remember. So it's Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, and Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. All great candidates. And by the way, some of the other names that had been floated who decided they did not want to be the pick, like Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, or Roy Cooper, the governor of... all right, somebody's going to have to call in and tell me what state Roy Cooper's from. But also great candidates. And frankly, the Democratic Party's bench, for lack of a better word, that's what everybody says, they call it a bench, is so deep that there are probably a dozen more people that could have been named as candidates, and all of them would have been great. Compared to the other side, all you have to do for comparison is see who the Republican Party paraded up to make speeches at their Republican convention. You know, I mean, I don't even have to go through the list. They're just, you want to, you know, the Republicans were calling Kamala Harris a DEI hire. You know, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Who could be more DEI hires than the mediocre white men who win congressional and Senate races for the Republican Party? I mean, it is just incredible, but you know, it's in the projection category that the right wing always does. So let's get to the picks. You know, being I'm living in Arizona and I'm talking to an Arizona audience, I think it would make incredible sense politically and in so many other ways if Kamala Harris picked Senator Mark Kelly as her running mate. I think it would really help in Arizona. I think Mark Kelly is the kind of moderate Democrat who would be very acceptable to moderates and independents in other states like Pennsylvania, which Democrats have to win. He probably would help in Nevada. And, you know, just because of who he is and what his background is a NASA hero and, you know, husband of Gabby Giffords, who's doing a tremendous job in trying to stop, you know, gun violence and support gun safety laws, I think he would be a great pick. Now, right now, the money seems to be on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and who has, by the way, been killing it on the campaign trail as a surrogate for Kamala Harris. I mean, he's just an outstanding speaker, incredibly smart. People in Pennsylvania love him as governor. The pushback, however, the last few days has been coming from, I guess you have to call it the extreme left, who have been pointing out some things that they don't like about Josh Shapiro. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but among them, Josh Shapiro supported private school vouchers in Pennsylvania. He's advocated for cutting taxes in Pennsylvania. He also made some very tough comments about the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protesters when that all was going on. So the progressive movement has been pushing back on the idea of Josh Shapiro. Now, you're going to say, well, Stephen, aren't you a progressive? Don't you call your show the Patriotic Progressive? In this particular case, I want to put the emphasis on the word patriotic. By patriotic, it doesn't mean that I'm an extreme leftist crazy who is just going to sabotage our candidates the way Bernie Sanders did Hillary Clinton in 2016. You know, you can be a progressive and have some issues that you can be moderate about and have some issues that you can compromise about. And as a couple of people have pointed out to me regarding Josh Shapiro and some of his policies in Pennsylvania, the guy had to win an election and get independents on his side and maybe get some Republicans on his side. And if that's what needed to be done to ensure that an extreme right-wing Republican didn't become the governor of Pennsylvania, then that was fine, at least with me. So I think Josh Shapiro is going to be one of the key people whose name you hear on Tuesday. But if it's any of those other nominees, whether it's Pete Buttigieg or Tim Walz or Mark Kelly, I think they'd all be great candidates. And they would probably wipe the floor with J.D. Vance if he has the guts to debate the candidate. Unlike Donald Trump, by the way, who's bailing out of debating Kamala Harris. So keep an eye on that. That's going to be the exciting moment. I talked a little bit last week about, the concept that crosses over between sports and politics, which is momentum, or the big mo, as they call it. And if you're following the race and you don't understand that Kamala Harris has incredible momentum, that the Democrats have incredible momentum, that poll numbers, and by the way, I don't try to focus too much on polls, especially the national polls. I don't really trust them. But that said, if you're gonna have a poll, you want your person to be winning it. So, and Kamala Harris is starting to win a lot of the national polls. She's winning some of the swing state polls, which are the more important ones, and she's tied in some of the others. So it's really moving in Kamala's direction, not only with polling, with money, which is off the charts, with the crowds that she's getting at her rallies. The crowd that she had in Atlanta last week was phenomenal. And she had an all-star team of surrogates up there with her. Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, the senators, Stacey Abrams, the big voting rights advocate in Atlanta and Georgia. So this is moving in the right direction, folks, but we can't rest on our laurels. We can't get too ahead of ourselves. We can't get overconfident. We have to work our butts off between now and November, because there is nothing, and I repeat, nothing more important in November than making sure Donald Trump does not become president again, or we are in really deep, I'm not going to use the word on the radio. So I don't know what you guys think out there. In future shows, by the way, I'm going to talk a lot about Project 2025, the program, the policy position paper, the 900-plus page position paper that Donald Trump now wants to disavow, because he realizes, like the position on abortion, it is really toxic with most Americans. It's a lot to dive into. When we talk about Project 2025, we're going to try to crystallize it as best we can to the most important talking points. I will probably have a guest on who would be a real expert at it and can have a great conversation analyzing it and how toxic that is. But it's a scary document, folks. If you want to keep this democracy, and it is a democracy, no matter what people who have right-wing talk shows on this station say, we are a republic, but we're also a democracy, and we have to keep it. Okay? The Supreme Court is running roughshod over the rule of law, at least the extreme right-wingers on the Supreme Court. I'm totally in favor of the proposals that Joe Biden made this past week on how to reform the Supreme Court. Term limits, ethics rules, trying to get rid of that ridiculous ruling on presidential immunity, which Donald Trump is going to try to use to keep himself out of jail. So I don't know, folks. I've been following politics since I was a kid, and I have never seen a political election cycle like this one. I thought 2016 was crazy and 2020 was even crazier. This one is completely off the charts. Wild. I didn't want to say weird because that's the word that we've been using to categorize Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So that was a mouthful. And as you can tell, we are going to talk about a lot of these issues going forward on this show. So, my friends, that's it for the Patriotic Progressive on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio today. Many thanks to my producer in the booth, Ryan Thompson. Please tune in again next Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. for an extremely important show. We will be discussing the powerful, recently released documentary called Bad Faith, Christian Nationalism's Unholy War on Democracy, with my very special guest, the writer, producer, and director of the film, Stephen Giulacchi. This film is a film that iconic documentarian Ken Burns called a great and powerfully timely film. And remember, you can also live stream our show on mellowmountainradio.com and hear the podcast version on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Podcast. And at 10 a.m. this morning, please tune in to Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, when our topic will be caretakers of Sedona's storied history, and my special guest is Nate Myers, the executive director of the Sedona Historical Society and the Sedona Heritage Museum. That's going to be a great conversation because Nate is going to tell us all about these tremendous programs that the Sedona Historical Society is going to have in the upcoming months, including a fantastic exhibit on the artwork of Helen Jordan, who is a famous, iconic Sedona resident. So thanks for listening to the Patriotic Progressive for truth, justice, and the democratic way. Have a great week, everyone.